We will continue today with the story of the Avadhuta Brahma. I wanted to connect we're on Zoom now. I want to connect my computer to the Zoom so I can show a clip. What's the Zoom link? I thought I had it, but I don't. That's fine. Just sign into this here. And just put bcohen@ivs.edu. I assume a lot of devotees, I think, are at Sadhu Sangha now. Unfortunately, this year it wasn't broadcast. The hotel internet couldn't sustain it. Usually we can all sit in. Who here has been to Sadhu Sangha? Who has not been to Sadhu Sangha? This way I make sure everyone's awake. Okay, it's quite an amazing festival. Indra Swami is the most brilliant at festivals. And what he did is he organized it in such a way that about 2,500 people. And that's only because they cut enrollment at that. And registration opens, and usually 10 minutes after it opens, it's sold out. And then for 3 days, you do one thing. You chant Hare Krishna with some talks and all. Some of the best kirtaniers, Adi Gopi, wonderful lady from New York, and Madhava, who has this enchanting voice, Indra Swami, and it goes on like that. It's quite nice. How do I sign in? Oh, you sent it to me, right? Let me just click on that. You know what that noise means? It didn't come. You put bcohen, bcohen, @ivs.edu. As they say in India, just now coming. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, Vaninath, good morning. Always good to see my own. Yes. Oh, wait a minute. And Christina, we have a BI contingent here. Okay. In this, now you've been studying this chapter for a while. This is the 11th canto. And in the 11th canto, we have King Yadu is being instructed by an Avaduta. What's an Avaduta? Tell me what an Avaduta is. Every year at Krishna House, we at least have one or two. Never been here without a few. So what's an Avaduta? Somebody tell me. Yes, please.
Is someone who is so into their devotion to the Lord that they don't care about social custom or, pleasing the people around them. An equivalent could be seen in the Western sense, the fool for Christ.
Oh,
It's very similar.
clever way to put it.
Yeah.
Very clever way to put it. What's the difference between it? This is a difficult question. What's the difference between an Avaduta and a hippie?
Avaduta loves the Lord.
Okay. Hippie days, there was a time when I had long hair. Now I just long for some hair. Things change as time goes on. Actually, I failed as a hippie. I did. Okay. Suggest. Yeah, I did, because hippies were required to not shower every day, and I did. It was one of the rules. When I first went to India, and the Peace Corps, we were all staging in California, going to our various locations all over the world. And we were, in those days, we were kind of proud of long hair. And in order to conform with society, you had to not conform. Just like nowadays, if you go to the mall to buy jeans, you can buy a pair of jeans for $40. But if you want to buy jeans with holes in it, they're $50. I'm not exaggerating. I confirmed that myself. So in order to be a non-conformist, you have to conform. And that was kind of what the hippie thing was. You had to conform to certain things. So when we were getting ready to go to India, the instructor said, okay, everyone has to get a haircut. And we were shocked. You don't take away our hair. We were shocked. They gave us the reason why, and we all went to the barber school nearby and got the $1 haircut. But the reason why is if Americans went to India in the early 70s and they had long hair, they were seen as hippies and not respected. Because the only Americans, youth that went there were generally stoned and dirty and not appreciated by the local culture. So they forced us to get haircuts. So you grow your hair any way you like when you get there. You can't start off like that. People will disrespect you, and they did. So we were trying to be somewhat avadutas. We don't care about this world. We don't care at all. Whatever anybody says, we just do what we want, detached. But to be a real avaduta, as explained, you actually have to understand deeper knowledge, not just pretend, not just be a pretender. So this is a real avaduta. And this avaduta is practicing an art that has become extremely popular nowadays. It's a technique. What is the technique that this avaduta is practicing? It's so popular. So you tell me. Say again, learning. Yeah, but there's a word for it. One word that describes it. Very popular. Everyone uses it now. You can't go anywhere without it. Yes.
Mindfulness.
Yeah, mindfulness. Mindfulness. Prabhupada was very mindful. I'll tell you a story to put it in context. One time, and You might have heard this story before, but I'm sure some of you haven't. One time, Prabhupada was going regularly for walks from the Juhu temple in Bombay to the beach. And you pass a 10-story building on the way. Some of you might have gone on that walk and seen it. And there was the same group of senior devotees who were walking with him every day, mostly Swamis, same group, maybe a half a dozen. And as they pass a building, Prabhupada turns and says, "Where is he?" Please look, you see, this Swami's here, that one's here, that one's here. Prabhupada, we're all here, no one's missing. Prabhupada goes, "Where is he?" Prabhupada, we're all here. Prabhupada goes, "Where is he?" The devotees are bewildered. Then Prabhupada said, "On the man on the top floor balcony, every day we walk by, he's standing there and he sees us, and today he's not there." That was mindfulness. Devotees were all kind of spaced out, and Prabhupada notices that the man who's on the 10th floor on the balcony every day isn't there that day. Prabhupada was keenly aware of things around him, but keenly aware in relationship to realization. That is what avadhuta means. So sometimes we come across devotees who are very, very sincere avadhutas. They just march to the beat of a different drummer, as the saying goes. And sometimes we have imitation avadhutas. They're the ones that don't smell nice. I consider that not very important. Okay, so we'll get down to verses now. I want to put this in the context. And we're beginning today, I think, on verse 16. Is that right? Yes. Okay. You'll chant the verse. Okay. Yeah. 16? Yeah, 16. I gotta queue up something.
Eko Narayano Deva Vasrishtam Samahaya Nritya Kala Kalaya Panta Idameshwara Atma Dharo Khilashtraya.
Okay, and who would like to read the verse? Why don't you read it right here? Christina, you read nicely.
The Lord of the universe, Narayana, is the worshipable God of all living entities. Without extraneous assistance, the Lord creates this universe by his own potency, and at the time of annihilation, the Lord destroys the universe through his personal expansion of time and withdraws all of the cosmos, including all the conditioned living entities, within himself. Thus, his unlimited self is the shelter and reservoir of all potencies. The subtle pradhan, the basis of all cosmic manifestation, is conserved within the Lord and is in this way not different from him. In the aftermath of annihilation, the Lord stands alone.
There's a lot of versions we're covering today, so I'm just going to move on. What's going on here is the Avaduta is giving a class to King Yadu. And King Yadu, once a king, they tend to get a little proud, a little something, humility is a real challenge. And he's trying to, and the Avaduta just seems like, such an odd teacher. Doesn't care what he looks like, doesn't care how he dresses, just wanders around. But the Avaduta was totally mindful, and whoever he saw, he learned a lesson from. Now, how does that impact us on a daily basis? Well, I'll ask an obvious question, but how many of you have had some difficulty with your body, mind, or other people over the last week? Okay. Now, so antibiotic, diabetic, these different difficulties. We all have it. So the only thing, we can't change the difficulties. They're going to come. Just hurricanes come. We're in Florida. Too hot, too cold. These things come. What is the one thing we can change? Is how we look at it. And one way to look at it is just to tolerate it. Another way to look at it, which is very intriguing, is to, it's easy, too hot. Another way to look at it is to say, what can I learn from this? Everything is a lesson. We are basically here. The reason we're here is to learn something. That's why the material world exists. It's a schoolroom. Sometimes I lament ISKCON. We build big temples. Temples are wonderful. We love worshiping deities. But gosh, if we had taken 10% of what we spend on temples and put it into education, our movement would be known all over, because what we have is the most valuable thing here, this information. So this Avaduta is seeing enlightenment wherever he goes. In the book, I know Shamla mentioned this in the class last week. Rita Nanraj translated this 11th canto, and I actually produced the books. I ran that BBT division. So I would be there as the manuscripts were coming out. And it was so exciting to read this. And this one section was so interesting that we came out with a small book, which must be reprinted. And it's called, this chapter, Enlightenment by the Natural Path. What an attractive title. So we're going to go on with some of these stories here. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. So he talks about the spider. Wherever he sees, he learns something from. I still haven't figured out what lesson I'm going to learn from the cockroach, but that's another story. So the spider expands a thread through his mouth, plays with it for some time, and eventually swallows it. You've seen that with the spider. They produce the web, and then when they want to pull themselves up, they just pull the webbing material, that silk, into them. So it comes out of their mouth and back in their mouth. The Supreme Personality of Godhead expands his potency from within. Thus, the Lord displays the network of cosmic manifestation. So seeing the spider, they realize that's how God works. Things come out, they come in. It's seeing everything in relation to the Supreme. Then there's a story of the wasp. Now, a wasp forces a weaker insect to enter its hive and keeps him trapped there. In great fear, this weak insect constantly meditates upon his captor. And without giving up his body, he gradually achieves the same state of existence as a wasp. Eventually, he becomes wasp-like. Now, what verse in the Gita talks about this? In the purport, it's described more. It's not necessarily in the same body, but a transformation occurs. what that transformation, well, did I ever tell the story about Satchidananda Swami and the butterflies? I'll tell you a story. Satchidananda Swami is one of my absolute favorite teachers. He has this wonderful German accent, my dear, dear devotees. And he's a teacher with humility and great depth. So whenever he comes to Gainesville or wherever we are, we always sneak away for a half a day somewhere, it's the two of us. We just have this rasa going on. So when he was here last time, I said, Maharaj, I'm taking you to a surprise place. And I took him to the butterfly atrium. Who has been to the butterfly atrium in Gainesville? Quite a remarkable place. You walk in like a little walk through a jungle, and you have to go through two doors because they don't want any of the butterflies to escape because they're not native, the invasive species. And there are thousands of butterflies in Atlanta and all over the place. It's like an enchanted forest. I think that's a fair. Is it like that, Advaita?
Yeah. And there's also little birds.
Yeah. Little birds walking. It's a remarkable place. So I took him there so we could just talk. Nice, peaceful place. And we have some intimate things we want to talk about. We often talk about the mystical aspect of Krishna consciousness. So we're sitting on a bench, just the two of us. And he tells me a remarkable and shocking story. I'm still shocked by the story. His father, who just died last year, was a Nazi SS guard at concentration camps. In other words, in the evilest position on the planet. His father wasn't a bad person, but got sucked into his duty. The rest of his father's life, he had nightmares and regrets about it. And in this concentration camp, the Jews, especially the Orthodox Jews, would go to a staging area where they're told, get ready for your showers. We're putting you all through showers. And of course, the showers were gas chambers. Shower nozzles that go in, they release this like a cyanide kind of gas, and everyone would die. And 6 million. And these Jews knew where they were going. The Nazis weren't fooling them. And when they were in the staging room, they would draw butterflies on the wall. And there were butterflies all over the wall. And so Satchidananda's father asked one of the leaders of the community, what does that mean? He says, I can't tell you. Because if I tell you, he'll be more angry with us because the Nazis want to see him suffer. And there was a secret in the butterflies. If I tell you, you'll be more angry with us, so I can't. So his father said, look, I have every torture device known to man. I can pull your fingernails off. I can torture you with electric shocks. I can do anything I want. Eventually, you're going to tell me. So you might as well tell me now. Because I really don't want to hurt you. He wasn't a bad person that way. So then the rabbi told him this story. It was the caterpillar turns into a butterfly. In other words, the caterpillar doesn't die, nor are any of us going to die in the gas chamber. We're just transitioning to another body. They understood that scene. And if the Nazis understood that the Jews weren't suffering at death, some of them would have got angry because they were very mean, nasty people. So, Satchidananda Swami, while we're surrounded by butterflies, tells me this story. So what does Krishna say about this in Gita? Whatever we're thinking of at the time of death, that's what happens next life. And so this verse here, the story when the Avadhuta saw a wasp and an insect, and he saw what happened, he understood the transformation that can occur by consciousness. That's very, very important. That transformation, well, I'll give you another story. There is a king of England. Who's the king of England? Charles the what? The third. Yeah. You don't want Charles the first. I think he lost his head. In England, if you read the 1,000 years history of the kings and queens of England, they all had food tasters. Why did they have food tasters? They'd cook this opulent meal and somebody else would take the first bite. Always. Why was that? Wasn't poisoned. Because their relatives and cousins are always killing each other to try to become king. Now that has stopped in the last, since Queen Victoria or even King George, that hasn't, of the Revolutionary War, that hasn't gone on. Before that, it was just one murder after another. Relative to become king. King Charles, there are some astrologers who say, and Prabhupada gave this some credence, we don't know if this is true, and I'm not presenting this as a fact, but it's an interesting hypothesis that several major astrologers have said who King Charles was last life. He was somebody who always thought of the British and was extremely pious. Because Krishna says, than to be born to become the king of England, very high birth. So who was always thinking of the British and was extremely pious and died a year before King Charles was born? Come on, think. Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi. And what was King Charles, what was Gandhi always thinking of? The British. He lived his life thinking of the British. So all day and night, British, 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 British. And he's extremely pious. I mean, you know, he vegetarian, he became celibate, read the Gita, lived a very simple life. And though it was funny, in India, the sadhus say Gandhi was a politician, and the politicians say he was a sadhu. I leave it to you to decide which is which. So the first lesson here in the wasp is the transformation. Then he says, from all these spiritual masters, I've acquired great wisdom. Now, he says, let me tell you what I learned from my own body. So he talks about the various spiritual masters, and you've had other classes in which he discusses everything from the prostitute Pingala, various folks he had met over time. Now, but this verse has something a little bewildering, and this is discussed in the purport up ahead. So let me ask you this. I'm going to read this. Tell me what's bewildering about it. From all these spiritual masters, I've acquired great wisdom. What's wrong with that sentence? Something's wrong with that sentence. In Arishkan tradition, our Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition. Second. Yeah, usually we think we have a guru. So is this contradicting our tradition? You can answer that. It's actually discussed. Yes, take a microphone.
Just like God, Guru is one.
Yeah.
But yet he manifests in so many different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. And we also have Shiksha gurus and Diksha gurus, and we learn from everybody. Sure, we have a principal guru. Let me ask you this. In our tradition, is the principal guru the Diksha guru or the Shiksha guru? Let's take a vote. Who says it's the Diksha guru? Take a vote. Who says it's the Shiksha guru? Okay. Well, we have some split opinions on it. We shall ask Jamuna Jivani, who has studied this extensively, to answer this question before I get totally bewildered. I'll ask you to answer that one. I'm putting you on the spot.
Our parampara is a shiksha parampara. To put it succinctly.
Well, sometimes diksha, sometimes siksha, isn't it? I mean, Bhaktisiddhanta took initiation from Lord Kishore. Bhaktivinoda Thakur was a Shiksha disciple of Jagannath Das Babaji. So which is it?
Well, it's primarily shiksha.
Yeah. Primarily whoever gives us instruction, but it's also Diksha. And sometimes Diksha is the primary guru. Sometimes Shiksha. Myself, I might have taken initiation from Prabhupada, but I have many mentors who guide me. So this is the secret of this. We take good instruction wherever we get it, but we still have fidelity to those who are giving us our holy name and connecting us to Krishna. It's a loyalty and an openness at the same time. So going on here, so he's looking at his own body. This material body is also my spiritual master, says the Avadhuta Brahman, because it teaches me detachment. Being subject to creation, destruction always becomes to a painful end. Thus, although using my body to acquire knowledge, I will remember that it will ultimately be consumed by others and remain attached. And remaining detached, I move about this world. A man attaches to the body, accumulates money with great struggling, and to protect the position of his wife, children, property, animals, servants, relatives. He does all this for the gratification of his body. As a tree before dying produces a seed of a future tree, the dying body manifests a seed of one's next body in the form of one's accumulated karma, thus assuring the continuation of material existence. The material body sinks and dies. He's seeing past, present, and future. Now, I can see past, present, and future. How many of you can see that? How many of you can see past, present, future? I can. Oh, come on. Nobody else can? Am I the only mystic here? I'll tell you how I see it. Yes. I go on the street and I see someone terribly suffering. Now, it doesn't mean I don't have compassion. Doesn't mean I don't want to relieve their suffering. But I see them suffering, I understand their past. They wouldn't have suffered like that without such. And then I watch somebody like some of our, let's say, big cheating politicians, stealing a lot of money and declaring wars and making people's life miserable. I know what their future is. I know what it is. I can't say exactly precisely because I'm not God, but I know their future. So when I see someone suffering, I know their past. When I see someone enjoying, I know their future. So we can see past, present, we can be mindful, observing, and future. All of us have that ability. And this is what the Avadhuta Brahman is teaching. All of you to become mystic and see past, present, and future. But our life in a bigger context. Now we go on to the interesting verses here. A man who has many wives is constantly harassed by them. He is responsible for their maintenance. Thus, all the ladies constantly pull him in different directions. Similarly, the material, so he's learning, let's say he meets a polygamous man who has many wives. In his wandering, he would see that. And he said, this is just like the material senses harass the soul, pulling him in many directions. On one side, the tongue is pulling him to arrange tasty food. Then thirst drags him to get a suitable drink. Then the sex organs clamor for satisfaction. The sense of touch demands soft, sensuous objects. The belly harasses him until it's filled. The ears demand ear pleasing sounds. Sense of smell hankers for pleasant aromas. The eyes clamor for pleasing sights. As the senses, organs, limbs, all desiring satisfaction, pull the living entity in many directions. So, with that, can you give me screen sharing? We'll give a song that describes some of this. I played this song once other, but many of you weren't here. But when I did, I didn't do it with words so people couldn't follow. So we'll do it with words this time. What happens when we get too attached. Okay, here we go. Just have a little fun. You ready? Oh, I'm not getting this. Let's see, the sound should be working.
What do you get when you fall in love? A guy with a pin to thirst your love. That's what you get for all your trouble. I never fall in love again. I'll never fall in love again. What do you get when you kiss a guy? You get enough germs to catch pneumonia. Then you do, and never fall. Yeah, I'll never fall in love again. Don't you know that I'll never fall in love again? Don't tell me what it's all about, 'cause I've been there and I'm glad I'm out of those chains that bind you. That is why I'm here to remind you, what do you get when you fall in love? You only get lies and pain and sorrow. So for at least until tomorrow, I'll never fall in love again. No, no, I'll never fall in love again. I'm out of those chains that bind you. That is why I'm here to remind you, what do you get when you fall in love? You only get lies, pain, and sorrow. So for at least until tomorrow, I'll never fall in love again. Don't you know that I'll never fall in love again?
A little entertainment for you. That was a popular song. Who's heard this song before? I know Funny Enough has. Yeah, Dionne Warwick, right? She was a gospel singer who made it big and pop singer. Beautiful voice. So that is some of the lesson of the Avadhuta. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have love. What she's saying is not this total material love that he'll give you enough germs to give you pneumonia. And so it's not an expose against love. It's not a story here that one shouldn't have loving relations. Rather, one should fall in love and become bewildered. And so when the Avadhuta was wandering and he came across a man with many wives being pulled in every direction, he became quite upset. We see the same thing in Shakespeare. Who here has read Hamlet? Hamlet got very upset with Ophelia, his girlfriend, and he turns to her and he says, "You lisp, you amble, you jig. God giveth you one face, and you maketh another. There shall be no more marriages. Get thee to a nunnery." In his famous soliloquy. Of course, he regretted that later. Realized it's kind of a little off, but we find through all the literatures there is this of men becoming overly attached to women, women becoming overly attached to men, and a certain suffering comes. So how, as devotees, do we deal with this? Because we need to be attached in order to make family life work, and family life is the basis of society. Yet we need to be detached. So there's a secret for that. And the Avadhuta here is hinting at the secret. What is the secret? To be detached or not attached? How does one develop their relationships in such a way that it works for them? That works, meaning it gives them progressive spiritual progress. How does one do it? What's the secret? Anybody know? I've asked a tough question. Well, I'll give a hint. Yes. Yes, please. No, you go ahead. I want to embarrass you first.
I was thinking like we get attached to like people or in relationship, but with the understanding that we're not getting attached to the body, but the soul which is connected to Krishna. So when you're related to someone by the relationship to Krishna, that is not gonna give us the same like suffering as when we're attached to someone, the body, and we forget their relationship to Krishna.
That's all true. Now I'm going to give you the technique to do that. Yes, go ahead.
I think what he's saying is to savor your suffering. So to, not kind of like, oh, I'm suffering, like, oh, I'm not going to think about that, but really pay attention to your suffering, because the suffering is what helps you become like more detached.
Sometimes, yeah, it can. I mean, I've never met anybody at a pharmacy going there to say to the pharmacist, do you have some medicine to make me sick? We don't look for it, but it comes on its own accord. But there's a technique, especially in relationships. There is a technique that allows us to be transcendental in our relationships and have the relationship succeed. And you have to do just hinted that. Here's the technique. I think, would you like to know this technique? Very useful. It is, I'm trying to remember, I think I forgot. Okay. What the technique is this, is we are outwardly very attached and inwardly detached. Bhaktivinoda Thakur taught this. We find relationships, be it friends, husband, wife, whatever relationship is, those that fail are where we are outwardly very detached and inwardly very attached. So we might treat our partner in a bad way. Oh, I'm detached. But Bhaktivinoda said, no, that's reversed. Outwardly very attached. Oh, what can I do for you? How can I take care of you? How can I serve you? Inwardly somewhat detached. That's the hard part. And the Avadhuta is trying to, using its own body, to teach us that very, very lesson of how to be inwardly detached, because I know everything's relation to Krishna. Outwardly, we do our duty and we're attached. In the Gita, Krishna emphasizes many, many times Arjuna has his duty. Arjuna didn't want to fight. When I first read the Gita, I was in the peace movement, the anti-Vietnam War movement of the 60s. We were protesting against the Vietnam War, burning our draft cards, and hell no, we won't go. We were thinking of going to Canada because Canada at that time might have been cold, but it wasn't drafty. So, we had a lot of slogans and sayings and things to do. And, I thought the Vietnam War, as many other wars, was a really stupid war. I mean, it's one thing when you're fighting somebody like Hitler, you just, it's evil, you have to fight. But Vietnam War made no sense sociologically. Vietnam War began with the Gulf of Tonkin. In the Gulf of Tonkin, just to give a context, a little historical context, some American ships were allegedly attacked by North Vietnam. And then Congress got very passionate, mad. Oh, we can't allow that. And they passed a resolution giving the president authority to engage in war without declaring war. It was a weird resolution. And then that was a whole justification for 50,000 Americans dying in the battlefield, 600,000 troops going to Vietnam, and unlimited bombs dropped, and defoliating whole forests with Agent Orange. Just a horrible thing. It turns out those American ships were not attacked. It was fake news in order to justify something. That came out later on in the Pentagon Papers. It was, discovered it didn't even happen. Yes, there was some North Vietnamese ships that came close to the American ships, but they never fired. But, you know, this is historical facts. I'm not making this up. And then we had this horrible war. And I was thinking, protesting this war, what good is such a ridiculous war? But Prabhupada commented on, he said, America has killed so many animals. Now America's karmic reaction, it's seeing 50,000 of its youth slaughtered on the battlefield. It was a national karma for just too much animal slaughter going on. And so we ended up with this war. Vaninath, were you drafted? Oh, okay. Yeah. Maybe almost. It's almost, but somehow or other, Krishna made a different arrangement. Some of the earliest devotees to go to India, Chutananda, others, they were drafted. Prabhupada said, just go to India. So they went to India. That's how the movement began in India. Basically, draft dodgers. So in a place like, in that milieu of the Vietnam War, I was reading the Gita. Now the Gita bewildered me because I was studying nonviolent confrontation with the Quakers and how to nonviolently protest wars and what to do when the cops come with their sticks to beat you and how to nonviolently respond to all this. I had all this training. Then I'm reading the Gita. What was bewildering to me about the Gita? Yeah, it was on the battlefield. A little bewildering. Hey, wait, this book is amazing, the Gita. It's telling me all the things that I knew. I knew from just when I was a kid, I wasn't this body. I don't know how I knew it. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew I wasn't this body. So just somehow just knew that. Then all of a sudden, the Gita is giving the great understanding of it, telling me how to understand it in great detail. And it's taking place on a battlefield. And I was a pacifist. I was a conscientious objector. I was, no way am I going to fight. So the Gita is bewildering. This is called, when you have this kind of bewilderment, there's a word for it. What's the word? Every spiritual tradition uses this word, this technique, where it's seemingly contradictory, but it's not. Paradox. It was a paradox. And that paradox forced me to go much, much deeper. The fact that the Gita took place on the battlefield when I was a peacenik really made me go deeper to try to understand it. So that's kind of what's going on. Enlightenment by the natural path, this avadutta, it's a way for us to go deeper by mindfulness. Whatever we see, it's an opportunity to go deeper. And ultimately, as it says in the last verse of the chapter, upon hearing the words of the Avadutta, the saintly King Yadu, who was a forefather of our own ancestors, became free from all material attachment. Thus his mind was evenly fixed on the spiritual platform. So it's 8:30. We'll stop here and see if there are any questions, comments, criticisms. Vaninath Prabhu.
Class. Going back to the point about the external attachment, internal. On the basis of that, we have social processes. Within the Vedic tradition, we have Varna and Ashrama as the guide rails in which to practice that. So I wonder if you could comment.
Well, Vaninath is quite the expert on Varnashram and is running a regular series on that. Unfortunately, I've cut my life out to focus just on VI, so I can't attend those things I used to love attending, but one must focus. Varnashram is the opportunity to, first thing Krishna says, Chartur Varnam, I created these 4 varnas. I created it. It's the natural thing. Prabhupada gives the example. During the Soviet times, Soviet Union was a communist country, and the communist country under Marxism, everyone was supposed to be equal. but the big government officials were in limousines and the ordinary people were walking. And every society is always like that. There's always these divisions will occur. Now, they may occur properly, or they may occur with unqualified rogues taking power. But either way, we always have these divisions. So what Varna Ashram does is it's the opportunity for us to understand our psychophysical nature and use that nature in service. It's that opportunity. I'll give you an example. Let's say you're a good capitalist pig, as we used to say in the hippie days. You're a good capitalist. That energy can be used very much in Krishna service. That's like the belly of the universal body, provide all the energy. It can be, or it can be used to exploit people horribly. My wife, who's undergoing a medical treatment, one medicine she has to take, and this is total exploitation. The medicine is $15,000 a month. Now, fortunately, I got a grant. I don't have to pay for it. I couldn't afford it anyway. And there's some kind of exploitation going on. Clearly, there's a lot of exploitation. But a proper somebody in Varnashram is supplying the energy for society, and they're very generous. A Brahmin has their role. Everybody has their particular role. But outwardly, they have to do their role. Inwardly, there has to be a certain detachment. If they don't have that detachment, then you get perverted Varnashram. Is that answer okay, Vanya? Anything you want to add to that? I know this is an area you study so intimately.
Well, in applying external attachment, internal, there's not enough guide rails in terms of what that could look like for social cohesion. And so the Varnas and Ashram give a path in which to do that. It's already kind of laid out. And then this is the path that you can go down to practicing it. And not just, because also even in the 60s, 70s, in many places read Bhagavad Gita, understood I'm not this body, we're all spiritual, but then didn't know what that looked like. And that ended up, naked people in the trees and everything in terms of external, trying to, in their understanding, apply certain ideas of detachment or attachment. And also unnamed children, like children who don't know who their parents are, and all sorts of unusual circumstances.
Put well, when Prabhupada was first ministering on the West Coast, he went to Morningside Farms. Anybody hear of Morningside Farms? It was a famous hippie commune near San Francisco. And Prabhupada went there. And in Morningside Farms, clothes were quite optional. And so Prabhupada went there, and the late and wonderful Gaur Hari walks up to him, stark naked, says, "Glad to meet you, Swami," and shakes hands. Prabhupada wasn't at all disturbed. And sitting in a tree, playing a flute, was was Prabhupada's #1 lieutenant. He had passed on now, but his #1, Tamil Krishna Goswami. He was sitting in a tree playing a flute. Again, he didn't dressed more like a monkey than a human. But he had nothing on. So, but Prabhupada wasn't disturbed by the externals. He just saw these people, this community were all spiritual seekers. And so he just gave them the secret. Okay. Are there any other questions or comments? We can go a little bit over if we need to, because today is not a Krishna lunch day. We'll see. Okay. Not, I'll give you one more monkey story if you like. Who knows? Maybe I told this here. I give classes all over, mostly by Zoom. So I don't know. I have to avoid, because of my wife's situation, being near anyone sick. By the way, is anyone sick here today? So I'll put a burqa on you, male, female, doesn't make a difference. Okay, good. Does anybody know the story of Satchidananda Swami and the King of the Monkeys? You know that story?
You narrated that.
I did tell that.
Most of the people that are here.
Who's heard the story of Satchidananda Swami and the King of the Monkeys? Yeah, who's heard it? Who hasn't heard the story? No. Share it briefly then. Yeah, I thought I told that. Couldn't remember if it was here or the Bhakti Center. All these devotees look alike. I walked up to one Indian devotee and I called him by the wrong name. And I said to him, I'm sorry, but all you Indians look alike to me. Do we all look alike to you? And he said, yes. That was Avaduta statement. Yeah. Satchidananda Swami, who's likes going off every year for a month or two to do a very private, deep meditation connection with the Holy Name. And he recharges his spiritual batteries. He's really serious about it. So he went off up into the Himalayas where the Ganges is pristine. And he's in this ashram near the bank of the Ganges. And they warn him, do not be careful. There are tigers in the woods, but they're not Bengali tigers. They generally don't eat people. They're scared of people, but just be cautious. Now, I lived near a forest when I lived in India that did have Bengali tigers. And one time, I was an itinerant teacher visiting schools. I had a 60cc like a moped to drive around, go to schools. And I was asking someone directions. Well, how do I get to such and such school? We didn't have Google Maps, didn't have road signs. You go down here and you'll see this big tree. You see the big tree, there's a little dirt road, you go down that, and you go here, and those what directions were like. So somebody gave me the directions how to get to the school. He says, how are you getting there? Like on my little putt-putt. He says, don't. Turns out the last person who tried that, tiger jumped out of the woods and goes quite a bit faster than the putt-putt. So instead of a 2-hour ride, my putt-putt, I had a 6-hour ride taking multiple trains. But the tigers do that. But these tigers in the Himalayas, they're gentler tigers in that sense. So Satchidananda goes to the bank of the Ganges and there's a rock there. And he climbs on the rock and he starts chanting. Totally alone, pristine forest noises in the background, the gurgling, fresh Ganges just coming from the glacier, flowing past him, an ideal place. He says, for me, my mind to be peaceful, get deep into the holy name. And he hears a rustling behind him. Maybe it's a tiger. And here's a lot of rustling, a whole lot. What is it, a herd of tigers? And then he sees these giant monkeys coming out. These kind of whitish, brownish monkeys. I forgot the name of them. They're very big, kind of ferocious monkeys. They're not little cute guys with a tail or something. They're big guys. And they're coming towards him. He's sitting on their rock where they sit on to get water from the Ganges. He's in their territory. And animals can be very territorial. And they're coming at him and they're growling the way monkeys growl. They're not happy. He says, what do I do? Well, if I throw a rock at him, they'll attack me. There's no place to run. I'm surrounded by monkeys. What do I do? What would you have done? Yeah, chant Hare Krishna. What he did. And there was another rock nearby with the bigger monkey on it. And this bigger monkey was just sitting there looking at it. He just starts chanting. The other monkey raises his arm. Stop where they are. He was king of the monkeys. Monkeys have kings. They all stopped. looked at the monkey. The monkey looked at him. And he said, I'll just chant. And one of the things he was going to chant that day was Om, a deep-seated Om. And so he uttered the Omkara mantra. And to his utter shock, so did the monkey. He didn't know monkeys could say Om. I didn't know monkeys could say Om. And the monkey was saying Om for 45 minutes. The king of the monkeys and he sat there chanting Om. And at some point, the king of the monkeys gets up, signals the other monkeys, and they run into the woods. And then he goes like this to Sachinanda Swami. He disappears, waved his arm. Unheard of thing. This is a true story now, no exaggeration. Who was this king of the monkeys? And how does it fit in with the story of the opportunity? His guess was the king of the monkeys was a yogi. There's this mystical yogi abilities. And some yogis have the abilities to assume a different shape. If you were going to live in a jungle, would you rather have a monkey body or a human body? Monkey body is a lot easier. You can sleep in a tree, you can eat bananas, you don't worry about being cold at night, you have fur, you don't worry about it. Life is easy. I mean, if you're a human out there, life is much more difficult. So this yogi didn't want any people, and some yogis don't want anyone to bother them. But they can somehow assume a monkey body. So it was a yogi in a monkey body, and actually was more intelligent than anyone else. And that's the story he tells. Sometimes we find these mystical stories. Are they believable or not? And some aren't. Some are. But stories like this, Radha Swami, Sachinanda Swami tells them, they're very believable. We find these stories are also found in Shastra. That's how things do happen that way. So then Sachinanda just continued chanting. Life went on. But what an incredible story, seeing the king of the monkeys. So, yes, that's the kind of monkey. Yeah. Very good. Yeah. So with that, we'll stop here. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being at Krishna House. Tomorrow begins Krishna lunch. Okay, I was there Friday, meeting a professor friend. My gosh, was Friday good.